Whether you're here because you want to make football commentary your career, you want to do it part-time in addition to your full-time job, or you simply want to commentate as a hobby, these are 10 key skills you need to become a better football commentator. Welcome to Sheepskins for Goalposts.
And he scored!
The first thing we're going to talk about is technically not a skill, it's more of an asset, but it's one of the most important on this list. It sounds a bit obvious, but when we say knowledge, this doesn't mean memorizing all the goal scorers from every single World Cup final since 1930. While that is impressive, it's not what we mean by knowledge. By knowledge, we mean having a broad awareness of the history of the game, its origins, who runs the game, and who plays and contributes to it. Which organisations look after football around the world, and regionally, if we're covering local clubs, the federations, confederations, and associations. What are the main leagues and tournaments around the world, or the ones relevant to the teams we cover? The best known teams worldwide, nationally, or in our area. The key players who've made their mark on the game. Coaches who've blazed a trail with their pioneering methods and managerial skills. And those who've paved the way for change. One example is Jean-Marc Bosman, the former player behind the Bosman free transfer. The major games and moments in the history of football, some memorable, some tragic. But it's important to have an awareness of these events, as heartbreaking as some of them are. What's a Panenka, a Rabona, a Cruyff turn? Who invented Catenaccio, tiki-taka and total football? I'm not saying we should know all these, and this is by no means a comprehensive list. I'm just trying to make the point that having a good knowledge of the game is a good foundation for being a good commentator. When it comes to understanding, knowing the rules is the most important. Admittedly, we can't be expected to pluck out every law from FIFA's rulebook at a moment's notice, but we need to have a good understanding of the general laws of the game. The offside rule is the obvious example. There's also the double jeopardy rule when it comes to red cards and penalty awards. The 4 types of scenarios that can prompt a video review by the video assistant referee, or VAR. Rules can be changing on a yearly basis, so we have to keep on top of them. Also, for every game that we commentate on, we need to be aware of the rules that differ from competition to competition, like the number of substitutions allowed in normal time and extra time. Is the away goals rule in force for a particular game? Does the league we cover limit the number of foreign players, designated players, or those of a certain age? Understanding the basic formations teams now adopt. These are developed over the years, so they're more nuanced these days. You might be well aware of a 4-4-2 and a 4-3-3, but what about a 4-2-3-1 or a 3-5-1-1? They're a little bit more involved. What are they trying to achieve? You can't teach passion. We either have passion for football or we don't. If we want to be a good football commentator, then our love and enthusiasm for the game is fundamental. It will come across in our commentary if we have it. And just to say, passion doesn't have to be wild, uncontrollable, inaudible emotion. Passion is primarily within us, and it comes out of us naturally in many different forms. As commentators, we have to be able to control it. Be yourself, be distinctive. That doesn't mean try too hard to be different. Work on a style that fits your personality, something you're comfortable with. Too many of us try to sound or be like someone else, or try to develop a style or sound that's either fashionable at the time or which pleases others. While some of the previous elements I've been talking about don't necessarily differentiate one commentator from the next, personality certainly does. As does the way we sound, which brings me on to having a clear voice. Notice I didn't say good voice. That can be subjective. Everyone's view of a good voice differs. Admittedly, some people are blessed with voices that lend themselves really well to being heard on TV, radio, or online. And while that can be a pretty big advantage in commentary, it's not to the exclusion of others. For a start, our voices will develop over time. The more we study others, the more we practice, the more games we cover, and of course, as we get older. But a clear voice, one that's audible, is essential from the outset. If you're just starting out, you may be very conscious of how you sound. But once you've got used to hearing your own voice, which, incidentally, is the way everyone else hears it, your confidence will grow. We also need to have a broad vocabulary so that we're not constantly repeating words or phrases or umming and ahhing our way through a game. In addition to the Sheepskins for Goalposts content here on YouTube, our Patreon page offers you the chance to join the SFG community and gain further tips and advice from our live stream Q&As, personal commentary critiques, and one-on-one tutorials. The link for our Patreon page is in the description below. Listeners and viewers like personalities that they can connect with, but in the case of a commentator, they also want someone who can inform and tell them what's happening. The context of the game at that particular moment, the score, where the ball is. I go into detail on these in other videos. They're relying on us to keep them up to date with what's going on, particularly if we're doing audio commentary. We are the listener's eyes. We have an obligation to keep them informed. They're putting their trust in us to paint a picture they can't see. Excuse the pun, but we can't lose sight of that. And when painting that picture, we also need to be something of a storyteller. While the importance of being informative can't be underestimated, the way we relay that information can also be the difference between keeping our listener or viewer engaged or seeing them turn away or turning down the volume. The beauty of audio commentary is that we start with a blank canvas. We can use our voice, our personality, and that broad vocabulary I was talking about to shape our commentary, to apply those brush strokes and convey the excitement in our own way. TV commentary is slightly different, where pictures don't lie and we need to be able to interpret and complement what's being seen by choosing our words a little more carefully. Being able to process information quickly, cope with sudden changes to the game, and occasionally those unforeseen events is certainly a skill you develop over time and with experience. And you may not only be dealing with the action in front of you, but also relaying what's happening at other games and sporting events locally, around the country or the world, linking to other commentators and reporters at other matches. For example, if you're the main commentator for a BBC local radio station in the UK or 5 Live or Talk Sport, you will constantly be fed scores and prompts in your ears by the studio. It's known as talkback. It requires you to listen and process other information while trying to commentate at the same time. In TV, they often use something known as open talkback, where everyone, from those in the studio, the gallery, the floor manager, the camera operators, and the commentator, hear the instructions of the director and the producer. I remember my first ever TV game where I was trying to commentate while one of the production staff down the line was taking drinks orders for those in the gallery. You develop a skill for separating the wheat from the chaff. It's not an obvious asset, but understanding some basics of journalism can be very useful, especially in this age of multimedia where everyone is able to publish what they say on different platforms without any editorial filter. Knowing the difference between fair comment and slander, which is the oral version of libel, could save us getting into trouble, or worse still, facing legal action from someone we've made a comment about. Football is all about opinions, but there are boundaries to consider. Finally, dedication for the long haul, determination, belief in ourselves. Prepare for the knocks and the criticism. We have to be resilient in this industry. This is particularly relevant for those of you who want to have a professional career in football commentary. Not only is there a lot to learn and a lot of development to be had, you have to consider how competitive and how subjective an industry it is. And while we can all make ourselves as good as possible by learning, practicing, developing, gaining experience, and pushing to be better, the one element that is out of our control relates to the subjective nature of football commentary. And by that, I mean that one TV or radio producer, one head of broadcasting, one executive might consider you a good commentator and a great fit for their coverage, while another may not be a fan of your style or even your voice at all. That doesn't mean to say you're not a good commentator. It's just that everybody has different tastes and preferences. In the professional sector, these are the people who hold the keys when it comes to getting the high-end opportunities. Not only do they know what works for their coverage, they have that casting vote, so to speak. So that is where the subjective comes in. Keep it in mind, but don't dwell on it and try not to take it personally. It doesn't mean you stop knocking on the door of the company where the big cheese didn't like you, because should that person leave, Who's to say their successor won't be a big fan of your style and your voice?